Chapter 13. Repairs. As Will and his team approach the ghost, they see that Gabe and Benny have returned and are already hard at work. Gabe is standing on a forklift, reaching deep inside the port engine pod. Benny is also on the lift, a data terminal in hand providing the engineering bot with diagnostic information. Seeing the others approach, Benny sets the terminal down. "How'd it go?" Before Will can answer, Maxim does.
"It went well. I can't wait for someone to challenge us."
Behind the three rumbles a large cargo bot with a trailer attached. Benny whistles. Maxim directs the bot under the ship to where the missile bay is located, behind the boarding ramp. Zephyr heads up the ramp and into the ship. Will walks away to the maintenance lift, looking up at Benny and Gabe's legs.
"How'd it go with you two? I assume you got the parts you need, since Gabe is waist deep in an engine pod."
One of Gabe's smaller, secondary hands makes a thumbs-up gesture. Benny nods vigorously. "We sure did. Got everything on Gabe's list, and I got the shopkeep to throw in a new protein sequencer, free of charge." Will smiles, patting Benny's leg.
"Good work. The sequencer is older than the ship, I think. How long before we can take off?"
Benny looks at his terminal. "We've already replaced the parts in the starboard engine, and Gabe is almost done here. Everything else can be done on the way. I'd say another talk at the most. Unless Maxim needs more than that to load up the weapons."
"A talk should be fine. Maxim, we leave in a talk. Make sure everything is loaded."
There's a grunt and something mumbled from the back end of the ship, which Will assumes is a yes. He pats Benny on the leg again and heads up into the ship. Zephyr is waiting on the bridge when he walks in. "Will," she says, "I wanted to say thank you. I know this isn't your fight. I still don't know why you rescued Maxim and me from the Partherians. But you're risking your life and your ship. I can't thank you enough. I know even if we're successful, it won't change much for Maxim and I. We won't be able to go back to being peacekeepers. And honestly, I don't think I'd want to, knowing what I know now." She doesn't break eye contact with him, and she adds, "This could change the fabric of the sector." Will falls into his chair with a sigh.
"No thanks needed. And not because I'd be doing this regardless, or that I'm just that noble. Honestly, if I hadn't met you and Max, this wouldn't be happening. And I'd probably be okay with that. But here we are, and it has to be done. Plus, with the exception of almost dying, it's been pretty fun so far."
He looks at Zephyr thinking.
"I never told you. Back then when I rescued you and Maxim, I never said why I rescued you, did I?"
He looks down at his hands.
"I've owned the Ghost for about 3 cycles now. Well, I guess owned isn't the right word exactly. I'm the only survivor of the previous crew."
He raises a hand as he can see her forming a question.
"That's a story for another time. The thing that's important is this. About a cycle ago, the loneliness finally got to me. I had been alone on the Ghost all this time, doing whatever jobs I could get to keep the engines running and the ship's account flush. Only so many jobs a single person, even one as awesome as me, can do, though." He sighs and looks up at the ceiling. "I started looking for, I don't know, misfits. People like me, alone, broken, nowhere to go. I didn't know what I was looking for. I just knew somewhere deep down that I couldn't keep going alone, not anymore. Too many close calls, too many celebrations alone in the lounge. So when Zarix mentioned the 2 peacekeepers, abandoned by their own organization, and about to live out their days in the Partherian work camps, I figured I'd take a look."
Will spreads his hands wide.
"And here we are."
Zephyr is speechless. She's wondered about this ever since she first met Will all those weeks ago. She remembers him not answering that first day. She remembers him never bringing it up again. She's known it had to come up eventually, but figured it was his story to tell. But in all the versions of this conversation she'd run through in her head, none matched what he'd just told her. She sits there a moment more before saying anything. "I see. Well, for what it's worth, and I know I speak for Maxim as well, we're happy here,
We've only known you and Benny, for that matter, a short time. Gabe even shorter. And we're at least friends." She pauses. "But it feels more than that. Peacekeepers aren't known for our social entanglements, but this is the closest I've felt to family in a long time."
Will nods. "Yeah, Benny certainly wasn't in the plan. Gabe certainly wasn't either. But I can't say I'm not glad they're here." They both sit quietly for a few minutes, each deep in thought over what the other said, each enjoying the silence and company. Then the moment is ruined by Benny entering the bridge. "Come on, Krebnax, we're all set. So let's get the hell out of here." Like new. The Ghost is 4 hours from Harith Prime. Everyone but Gabe is on the bridge. Benny is at his station. Originally an auxiliary station, but now a hacker's hideaway, covered in a cobweb of data cables and additional displays epoxied to the hull. Zephyr is at her own station, assuming the role of second in command, and Maxim is at the tactical station. The large ex-peacekeeper is beaming, which is disconcerting to say the least. Most of the stations on the bridge of the Ghost look similar to one another, or they had before Benny came aboard. Tactical is the exception, with its additional displays and manual weapons control surfaces. The works, as Maxim calls it. "Now this is what I've been wanting," he exclaims, caressing his terminals. "So many weapons. The engine-mounted disruptors are both at 100%. The forward section disruptor turret also 100%. The targeting computer firmware is up to date. I could target Benny drifting out there from nearly 500,000 kilometers away and hit him with a single shot." "Hey," comes the screech from Benny's station. "Why would you want to do that?" Will nods, smiling. It's nice to see Maxim happy about something, but also nice to know the Ghost is in fighting shape. Something she slipped further and further away from since Will took over. "Missiles?" he asked. Maxim taps a few sections of his panel. "Both missile magazines are full. I was able to score a few multi-model ones, full yield, medium, or overload shields. Plus," he pauses and his grin turns a bit evil, "I got 6 XPX 1900s. Zephyr lets out a low whistle. "I don't remember getting those." "Me either," Will chimes in. "Also, what are they?" Maxim looks at Zephyr, then back at Will. "Ship busters." "The fuck?" Will exclaims, leaning out of his chair. "How did you manage to score those without Zephyr or I seeing, or bankrupting us, or alerting the peacekeepers, or even just the local police?" The large Pelorian grins. "After we made our purchases and you and Zephyr were on your way out, I asked the shopkeep for a favor. I thought I'd noticed him in the back of the shop in a corner, selling that type of ordnance is, if it's possible, extra illegal. He'd had them a few years and never found anyone to take them, at least for a price he was willing to take the risk for." "Okay, but since we hardly had any credits left, there's no way you could have paid that price, whatever it was," Will says. "Right, but I dropped some hints that we'd likely be quite popular and or wealthy if this mission goes well. Since he'd been sitting on them so long, and given that even being caught with them, selling them or not, would land him a life sentence on a peacekeeper labor moon, he just gave them to me." Benny, who's been listening intently, chimes in. "Maybe I have some competition for this crew's chief negotiator." Will looks at the hacker. "Who says that role is filled by you, Pipsqueak?" Benny affects a stricken look and seems about to protest when he scrunches his face up. "What's a pipsqueak?" In unison, Zephyr and Maxim both say, "A human thing." Just then, Gabe's voice comes over the speakers. "Captain, please come to engineering." Will hits a button on his chair. "On my way. Zephyr, keep us moving in the right direction. And don't let Benny touch my console." The Ghost is not a large ship. The forward section is only made up of 2 decks. The bridge, the staging area come armory, and airlocks, with a maintenance area below. The main corridor, or neck, as Will refers to it, is nearly as long as the primary section of the ship, One deck plus maintenance space above and below. It gets a bit taller as you move into the main body of the ship, where the crew space and lounge is, with engineering directly beyond. Will walks through it all, remembering the first time he was in the lounge. The hatch to engineering is closed when he approaches. He touches the control pad beside it, and a light turns green and the door opens. Gabe, what's up? Oh my god. The entire engineering space is spotless. The main engine is thrumming peacefully, the random hiccup that had plagued the drive apparently gone. The stains on the bulkhead that Will was always afraid to ask about are also gone. The maintenance area and workbench? Spotless. The heat that normally permeated the space? Also gone.
Hello, Captain. I wanted to give you a status update on the engineering space. As you can see, I've fixed the imbalance in the main FTL drive. I've also cleaned and replaced all the burnt-out thermocouples, which has addressed the increased heat in the compartment. Several other subsystems have been repaired or, in extreme cases, replaced.
Will is spinning around, taking it all in. You're a miracle worker. I wonder if there's another smaller you in that shoulder thingy. Gabe looks at the mysterious attachment.
I highly doubt there is a smaller copy of myself in this device.
Will shakes his head. Whatever it is, good work, Gabe. It's awesome that you're with us. Before he can say anything more, Zephyr interrupts over the ship's intercom.
Will, you better get up here. There's something you need to see.
Will turns and leaves without another word. As the hatch to engineering closes, Gabe bows his head slightly.
Thank you, Captain.
The past. After Benary finishes his work on the ship, Will spends another week on Fury. The small hacker has assured him that the identity change would propagate the old log files of the Fury space control, so that the Reaper isn't logged as landing while the Ghost is logged as leaving. Will spends much of his time on the ship, running through its training mode, which he discovers isn't limited to the flight controls. While engineering isn't his strong suit, he has been able to get the ship to at least train him on how to identify the more serious problems, even if he doesn't possess the skill to fix them. He uses a little more of his dwindling cash to hire an engineer to come aboard and give the engine space a once-over, addressing any major issues. Luckily, the previous engineering team had done a pretty good job of keeping the engine ship-shape. Once he's sure the ship is in as good a condition as possible, he ventures back into the shopping district and beyond. Benary has given him a rudimentary map, marked with places to avoid and places where he might find work, sorted by the kind of work he might be okay with, from mercenary work to smuggling to basic freight hauling. Will isn't sure which he is comfortable with, but is pretty sure that the former is out. If nothing else, he's not sure how good he'd be at that type of work without a crew. Hiring a crew is also out. Will doesn't know the first thing about leading others, nor does he know who he could trust, or what races work best with others. Plus, based on what's left in the ship's account, he's pretty sure the crew he could afford would kill him and sell the Ghost at the first opportunity. He wanders into a bar that Benary flagged as having potential for work of the non-mercenary type. Sitting at the bar, he orders a drink, Grum, which has become his new favorite beverage, if for no other reason than its ubiquitousness, and has reliable side effects. He knows he can get a buzz and even shit-faced, but it works so like beer that he can manage it. Almost everything else on the menu is liquors from around the sector that he has no idea about. One sip could lay him out, which wouldn't be good. Unfortunately, Benary's map and notes aren't tremendously helpful, or, at the very least, informative. The notation on this bar is simply the word Zarix, whatever whomever that is, Will thinks. He flags down the barkeep and leans forward. Does Zarix mean anything to you? I'm looking for it, or him, or her, or whatever. The barkeep looks at him blankly, then glances over Will's shoulder to the back of the bar, where several booths sit. All have a privacy screen activated, protecting their occupants from being seen or overheard. The barkeep points to the middle booth. Will nods and takes a big gulp of Grum, stilling his nerves, then gets up and makes his way to the back booths. As he approaches, two giant aliens move in from the tables nearby. Will has no idea what race they are. He's never seen either before. But that's not saying much, really. "What do you want?" one asks. Will looks up. This particular alien is nearly 8 feet tall and is apparently made entirely of muscle. "I'm looking for Zarix." The two just stare at him. "I was, told that, well, maybe he'd have work for me." Will is starting to rethink this whole idea when the silent one lifts its wrist comm and whispers into it. There's a reply, and the alien whispers somehow before he looks at his colleague and nods. They part, and the talkative one points to the booth. Stepping through the privacy field and into the booth, Will sees that Zarix is indeed a who, though of a race Will can't identify either. Something vaguely reptilian? "So you need work, huh?" the alien says without preamble. "Tell me about your ship." Will does his best to describe the ghost without revealing it's a warship. He's hoping this doesn't come up. Instead, he emphasizes his desire to haul cargo and maybe, if needed, to smuggle it. 10 minutes later, he leaves the booth with his first paying gig as the owner of a spaceship. Not bad for a human, he thinks to himself, walking out into the street beyond.